Kansas Soccer currently sits at second in the Big 12, and we have former voice of Kansas Soccer, Griffin Hughes, to take us through the team as a whole. Let's start with the defense. Very helpful, especially in the victory against Texas Tech this season.
You know, it's not a world-class defense by any stretch of the imagination, but they work with what they have. And what they have is Kayla Morrison, who doesn't, to me, get the recognition that she deserves playing in the center, but she is so good in the air, man marking, whatever she needs to do. Her vision is great. I mean, to me, she's probably the best player on this team at any position. What they did against Texas Tech, what they did against West Virginia, what they'll do, we'll use red to signify an opponent. If you're overloading the middle, something like this, which Texas Tech does because they have such talented players here, West Virginia, same thing. What they did was they would use the holding midfielders, which we'll talk about in a little bit. They would force the ball onto one touchline or the other. Let's say they forced it right. This is where Relly Gagne plays, one of the fastest players on this squad. They'll force it right, and then they'll move a center back over or a defensive midfielder to play this. That means that you are basically trapped here. You have nowhere to move the ball. You have nowhere to dribble. And while they don't have the athletes that some of the other teams have, what they do have is really good game planning, and they make up for some of their shortcomings, and it turns them into one of the better defenses so far in Big 12 play.
And that forces them to the outside and have teams not have to go up the middle. So let's go to the middle and look at the middle backs.
The center defensive mids, to me, this is, I'm going to say this a lot, I love watching them. I love watching the game plan. All right, so this goes back to an old form of soccer called catenaccio. It's Italian, invented in the 40s or 50s. What that was a sweeper that would play along this line right here, and you'd have a sweeper just about right here. The sweeper is basically a midfielder, but he would mostly play defense. This was before we knew what a center defensive midfielder is. That's what the sweeper was. Catenaccio died out in the 70s. It was replaced by this, the modern central defensive midfielder. That's what Jackie Georgelis and Hannah Kallmeyer are. They pass the ball, they can drop back defensively, and that's really where their strength comes. If they drop back, then KU is playing with 4 center backs and 6 defenders on the back line, and these two can get up and start playing offensively. They're so good at that. They're so good in transition when you're moving from dispossessing to now having the ball and moving forward. It's these two that get that started, and this is where Coach Mark Francis likes to build from the back. Not from the center backs, it's from these two players, Kallmeyer and Georgelis usually.
And now let's look at who they pass to up front: Katie McClure, Grace Hagan, and Lois Hukin.
You know, I really like this top 3. This is what they're going to start out with. Let's say Hagan up here, and then McClure playing in the center, and then Hukin on the left side. And my favorite part of this is not actually these 3. It's actually Taylor Estrada, who plays in the center midfielder role where Liana Salazar used to, except more in a center mid as opposed to a center attack. What they do is they set up triangles. It's a very Pep Guardiola-esque way of thinking. All right, so what you do is, let's say you have the ball here. Estrada will move over and create a triangle where Hagan can pass it back, and then when Estrada has it, she can either hit an overlapping Aurelie Gagne, she can hit a center defensive mid in the middle, or she can pass it into Katie McClure. All 3 of these players can interchange, and they can play right, center, or left. It's a concept called total football, invented by Ajax and Burnley back in the 70s. All of these players are interchangeable. Estrada can hit all of them with passes. That's where all of their offense starts, creating these triangles. It's a very sophisticated way of playing, and only the best teams can stop it. They're really balanced. This is how they get their scoring, and that's why you've seen only teams like West Virginia and Texas Tech and USC that have been able to really shut them down.
And because of this, we saw Grace Hagan and Katie McClure score a lot of goals this season. And we'll look to see if they score a lot of goals on Friday night down in Waco. They're going to travel down to Waco to take on Baylor. Griff, thank you for joining us, and
Anytime.
We'll be back right after the break.